Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ask Dr. Nick. My name is Dr. Nick Schmidlkoffer, and I work for the Neurologic Wellness Institute here in downtown Chicago. On today's episode, we are going to talk about how do eye movements relate to fall risk. And this is really important because as we age, we are more apt to fall. The elderly are at higher risk of falling. And this is due to a variety of factors, from decreased bone density, decreased muscle strength, but also decreased function of the nervous system. So the nervous system is super important in understanding where we are in space and then where we are going. And so in order to know where we are in space, we need to have this integration between our muscle joint proprioceptive system, our vestibular system in our inner ear, and then also our visual system with our eyes. And so these three things come and integrate together. And by integrating, they are then going to give us a sense of where we are and then where things are around us. And this allows us to then move, walk, and interact with our environment. So if we think mostly about eye movements, then eye movements are super important in being able to identify where we are going to step and what obstacles we might have to avoid when we're walking and stepping. If we have to maybe take a step up or down stairs, or if we have to, step over an object that's in our way, or just avoid something that might be rolling on the ground. At the same time, when we're turning, we also have to do very similar aspects. And by our eye movements understanding where we're going, then we can make the proper movements with our feet and with our arms and with our core stability and body in order to keep us stable and upright. Because walking is something that not many animals do. We have this big brain to be able to walk on 2 feet in this bipedalism, versus most animals have to use 4. They walk on all 4s. And so for us to be able to walk, we definitely use our big brain in order to do that. And what we're going to talk about today is a paper that looks at how locomotion or walking and saccadic eye movement, or eye movements that are quick and fast, looking in different directions and then fixating on different targets, are so interrelated in the brain. And that is why looking at eye movements in walking and fall risk is so important for us, especially as we get older. So let's go right to that paper. Okay, so the paper is from the Journal of Movement Disorders in 2018. It's called The Relationship Between Saccades and Locomotion. And so right away, let's look at the abstract. We say that there's a relationship between fixation, saccades, and gaits. Fixations are being able to look at something and just stay right on target. Saccades are fast eye movements, one way or the other, left, right, up, or down. And then obviously gait is walking. Human gait is a very complex thing that uses a lot of brain power. So there's a significant overlap in the neural circuitry between saccadic eye movements and locomotion. And behavioral studies have looked at the relationship between saccadic and gait-related impairments in normal conditions and in disease states. So basically, if you have a little bit of problem walking as a normal aging elderly person, or just a normal person, you feel a little imbalance and problem walking, you may have problems in your saccadic eye movements and then problems in how your gait or walking ability should look. At the same time, they've looked at it in neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and PSP and cerebellar disorders. And so by looking at those, they'd be able to see different overlaps between these eye movement abnormalities and gait abnormalities. So let's go right into the introduction here. Visual information from the environment is so important for these quick eye movements that allow us for these saccades and fixations. And then efficient locomotion is dependent on all that visual information so that we can make these quick eye movements to these areas so that then we can avoid targets. We can avoid things that are rolling around. We can avoid our dog that's running underneath us. And so all that's super important. Then, so difficult precision. We talk about the neurocircuitry. Okay, so there's a lot of different terms in relation to saccades and fixations, and then gait, like step time, width, length, stride, sway, all those things. I'm not going to talk too much about those. I just want to get right into this picture that shows the comparison between, on the left is the locomotor circuitry versus on the right is the saccadic eye movement circuitry. You can see there are a lot of areas that are very similar in both. And so let's look at first the locomotor. So in order to move, we get information coming from our spinal cord, these central pattern generators that are bringing up this proprioception from our feet, like how are muscles and joints and the feet feeling the ground in order to move. And this goes up into the brainstem, where there's an area in the brainstem in the reticular formation that helps us to understand and have these reflexes in movement. There's the cerebellum, which is our coordinating center of movement and thought. And so the cerebellum is important, of course, in movement. Then we have our midbrain, and we have parts of our basal ganglia. The basal ganglia allows us to turn on and off movements. And so that's all functioning importantly in gait. Our thalamus is the kind of sensory relay station, or the post office that is bringing in a lot of sensory information and then relaying it to our cortex up here. And our cortex needs information from our visual system to kind of say where we are, needs information from our parietal area. Our parietal area is the connection between our vestibular system and our somatosensory touch system. And then here is our planning movement area. And then up front is our prefrontal cortex, which is us making conscious voluntary decisions like I need to step up one step or step up two steps, or look to the right because I saw something moving towards me. Okay, and so that's all for locomotion. You can see that it's very similar in the saccadic eye movement circuitry. The only difference is you don't see much from the spinal cord because our eye movements don't really connect directly to our body, at least in our body and our muscles. But you have the eyes, and our retina brings in visual information, and that is going to work back towards the visual cortex to kind of say, like, this is what we're looking at. And the visual cortex is going to connect to the parietal area, which is these parietal eye fields. It connects to the locomotor and the planning of movements, whether that's planning of eye movements or planning of walking movements. And then as well, we have the prefrontal and the frontal eye fields, which is also important in initiating those saccadic eye movements. At the same time, we still have information in the basal ganglia that helps turning on and off those movements. The midbrain, the brainstem reticular formation is important. And then, of course, the cerebellum. The cerebellum is essential for coordination of movements. And so it's not just coordination of walking, but coordination of eye movements so that we can look quick to one target and we don't overshoot and come back. We don't undershoot it. So that's super important as well with that cerebellum. So there's this clear overlap. And if we have problems with our eye movements, then that may lead to problems in our gait and feeling like we're going to fall. So it's important that when we train balance, we have to train eye movements as well, because eye movements may be easier to train. We're activating similar areas in the brain, and those similar areas in the brain are going to then help us with our walking and gait abnormalities as well. And so this is where, again, we have to look at those three systems, that vestibular system, the visual system, and the proprioceptive muscle system, that we need all those to connect together. And so we want to work on all of them together, or we want to, if we have deficiencies in one and another one is kind of overdriving or working harder, we want to work on those deficiencies. So I want to show you one other part in this paper that I thought was really good. And right here. Okay, so there's a study that they looked at footfall and where eye movements are related to footfall. And so healthy participants fixated on a footfall target that were an average 2 steps ahead. So people were looking 2 steps ahead of where they were going to look to then make a decision of if they had to step there or not, or if they had to avoid something. Okay. Elderly participants with a history of falls tended to not look 2 steps ahead, but instead they fixated more on an imminent footfall target. So basically, they were only looking at their next footfall. And therefore, if they're only looking at the next footfall, we don't have, our bodies or our brains don't have the ability to then plan for the next step. And therefore, processing takes a little bit slower. And so this is super important in that we need to be quick enough with our eye movements to take in that information and then integrate it so that we can then move forward properly. Last thing is, here are the different disorders. Essential tremor, it works with that cerebellum, Parkinson's disease, PSP, Huntington's disease, another cerebellar one, cerebellar ataxia. How in all of these disorders, there are saccadic abnormalities and there are gait abnormalities. And a lot of them are falls. So falls here, falls there, decrease in stride length, and all of that can lead to imbalance and more likely to fall. And so if we can work on both of these at the same time, we can improve or decrease the risk of falling. And then lastly, here are just a couple examples. So here are, again, this is a review paper, so they looked at 3 different papers from 2008, 2002, and 2016 with different neurodegenerative diseases or stroke patients here on this one. And they looked at how eye movement training and gait or balance training affected outcomes. And so balance training here and eye movement exercises, foot placement and eye movement training, and then foot placement again, and then more eye movement training. All of these showed improvements in stance time, walking speed, improvements in ocular motor activity, locomotor performance, and improvements again in walking speed, step length, and cadence. So we have evidence here that improving eye movements or working on eye movements and gait and walking at the same time will then have improvements in fall risk or decreased fall risk, which is so important as we age in order to stay sharp and stay out of hospital, keep moving, and keep exercising for our general health. So that was the paper and the topic for today. Eye movements are so clearly needed for a healthy locomotion, healthy movements, and for preventing fall risk. And so if you feel like you are getting to the point where you do feel a little imbalance or off and aren't able to move as fast as you would like to for your health and longevity, it might be a good idea to get your eye movements checked. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. If you have any suggestions for future topics, I would love to hear them. And otherwise, stay healthy. Thank you.